Hello and welcome to a special edition of Ask the AD, The Future, Part 1, a three-part series with change coming for college athletics and for K-State. The athletics director at K-State, Gene Taylor, alongside I'm Brian Smuller. Glad you could join us. And we're going to get into all of this coming up over the next 3 weeks, bringing you some series of videos describing what that change is, what it means for us as K-Staters, and then what it means going forward in college athletics and how we all can pull together here. And we'll talk about that coming up a little bit later.
That's going to be important.
No
That's
doubt.
going to be really important. Absolutely.
Let's start with just the 40,000 foot view.
Okay.
The House settlement is kind of what we're talking about here. This is what is the change that is coming this summer. I think people hear the phrase House settlement, they think Congress.
Right.
That's not necessarily what this is.
No, it's a class action lawsuit brought by a group of athletes, but it was named after a swimmer whose last name is House. Obviously, there's a lot of athletes involved with it, and there's two pieces of this class action lawsuit that has been settled. It's now sitting in Judge Wilkins's court in California. She has until April 7th or sometime in April to finalize the settlement. Both the plaintiffs and the defendants have been months and months, negotiating this settlement between the two sides, NCAA Division I institutions, primarily the Power 4, Power 5, and this group of plaintiffs. And so what it is there's two pieces. There's the piece of those athletes that never had a chance to get their name, image, and likeness dollars, and that is back pay money that will come over a 10-year period to anybody who competed from 2016 until a year ago. And then there's going forward money, which is the dollars that we will share institutionally with our student athletes. And that dollar is based on 22% of the average revenue of the Power 5 revenues. And so that 22% equates out to about $20,500,000. Those dollars we will share with our student athletes going forward starting in July of 2025. The back pay is a lot. It's $10 million a year over 10 years. And that's being distributed outside of the institutions, but through the NCAA and some other revenue sources.
The $20.5 million is not the only number that
No.
will be added, because with this settlement, there is also the sort of tweaking of rosters per sport, addition and subtraction of scholarships.
Yeah, so before we used to have scholarship limits, and what's happening is anything that limits the student athlete's ability for opportunities, whether it's scholarships, whether it's the ability to transfer to another institution, that's where this lawsuit stemmed from, is we were limiting the student athletes, or that there was the perception of we were limiting. They still had a lot of great opportunities, clearly. But so what they've done as part of the settlement is they said, okay, we're no longer going to make scholarship limits an issue. You can give, if you want to give 34 baseball scholarships, go right ahead. If you want to give 105 football scholarships. But in that agreement, the other side of that is our side said, well, we have to limit our rosters. And so now we will have roster limits. Football will be 105, baseball will be 34, et cetera, on down the line. And so, but if you wanted to, you could give as many scholarships as you'd like within that roster. I don't think any school is going to do that. They're going to maybe add some here on the men's side, they'll add, whatever to make it equal, 50-50 on the women's side. But there's a lot of pieces to it, but the $20.5 million is what we'll share in revenue to the athletes, and then any dollars we spend on extra scholarships for us, which we're predicting about $1.5 million additional scholarships starting next year.
All right, so the quick math would be that's $22 million that's starting July 1st, 2025,
That's
is
correct.
added to the budget that we've got to somehow find.
Yeah, it's just, the way I try to explain it to our donors is we now have an expense category that we didn't have before. We've always had salaries, we've always had travel, we've always had equipment. We now have an expense category called revenue sharing with our athletes. And so that's exactly what it is. It's a rather large expense category, and $20 million plus the scholarships. But everybody's facing the same thing. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it as equal footing as we can. So it's a cap system. You can only spend up to $20.5 million. You don't have to spend all 20.5. But in order to be competitive, that's what you're going to have to do.
All right, so this starts in July. Does it stay that same rate for the next couple of years?
I wish. There's a formula that for every 3 years, The dollars will be looked at again. So it'll be on an annual basis. They'll look at what the average revenue is, and then it'll go up 4% over every 3 years, about 4% of what that increase is. So it's going to be interesting. It won't stay at 20 million. It'll continue to go up over the next 5 years as we look at it. I haven't really done the math on that yet, but just assume it's not going to stay at 20.5 million.
Yeah, some projected as high as 35 million by the time 10 years, right,
yeah,
as you get a decade out. All right, let's pause here for a minute and look back through where we've been. Collectives have been the main way that monies have been distributed to student athletes. So how is this different from collectives?
A couple of things. So when we first got into this and we started talking about name, image, and likeness, again, the NSA said, well, schools, you can't be a part of that. You can't help the student athletes. That's got to be a third party. So we created these collectives. The collectives were started. They went out and found dollars separate, either from our donors or from other people to give to the athletes directly from these collectives. That is now all coming in-house. So the athletic department will share the money. So collectives will change or maybe go away in some cases. But the collectives will not be involved when providing money directly to an athlete. Here we are still talking with our Wildcat Collective as kind of their role. We're starting to work through those kind of things. They'll still be involved. It'll be a change. They won't be asking for direct money. They'll be asking for something different, probably more on the true NIL dollars, what was supposed to be years ago NIL dollars, and that's what we're focusing on right now.
And there'll be a system that'll be set up to sort of monitor that. Well, how that plays out, we'll still wait and see, but that's at least the theory. Again, this sounds like a lot of money, $22 million in this day and age. Even in an athletic department budget, it's around $100 million, and you're throwing another 20 in there. So how long have you and your staff, senior staff here at K-State, been preparing for this moment?
Yeah, it seems like for years, and it really hasn't been because, the settlement the initial settlement got approved back in October, but we knew it was coming, right? There was discussion that the settlement was coming, but there were so many unknowns early that we weren't even sure how to approach it. Once we kind of learned what was going to be in the settlement, what kind of things we needed to focus on, we started probably in the fall with our staff. We used our compliance, our business office, our fundraising staff, Jill Shields, our deputy, myself. We sat in a room and started just running numbers. Okay, if we get to 20 million and we decided this is how we're going to divide it up amongst the sports, what's that percentage? What does that look like? What is each team going to get? And we did a $10 million exercise, a $15 million, and a $20 million. And we ran various scenarios. We've been working on it for weeks and weeks and weeks now to try to figure out what it would look like for us, what our goals are for each of the teams, if we were going to add scholarships, what that cost would be. Again, the scholarships still have to be in the 50-50 gender equity, as does, again, a lot of discussion about how the revenue is going to be shared too. And to get into that would take us all day, but we'll still continue to talk about it. But yeah, we've been working on it for several weeks. Since the fall.
And what are some of the things that you've already done? I mean, some of it is, we're already a pretty lean athletic department in some respects. So what measures have you already taken and what will be continuing?
Well, we're always looking at other revenue sources. We've been evaluating, how are we with our tickets? How are we with our parking? How are we with other revenues outside of our fundraising? And so we've looked at all that, and some of it's come already. Some of our donors have already seen that we are looking at ticket increases for basketball. We're looking at some other increases across the board, for next year in football. But we have to be very careful not to drive our market away, but yet understand that we really need to dive deep into every revenue source we have. For instance, taxes. We get charged taxes. We started doing that with our ticket buyers to recoup those dollars. And so every little thing that we look at, how are we spending our money? We're done travel. Are we making sure that we're not staying at the worst hotels, but we're not staying at 5-star hotels? But are we, how are we feeding our athletes? Do we need to continue to feed them at the level we're feeding them as they start to make more and more money? So we're really looking at everything we're doing. We're looking at our sponsorships, and where are we missing dollars that we can recoup to help us get towards that 20 million.
It's an interesting time, and this is kind of more of a fact-finding video here to begin in kind of where we're at.
Right.
And coming ahead, in the next week and then the week after, we'll be looking more at how K-State stacks up comparatively with those other schools who are also trying to figure this all out.
Yeah, this isn't just a K-State issue. And I, fortunately, I go across the country. I'm in some committees that every athletic director I've talked to, whether it's an athletic director at Ohio State or here, or Iowa State, or the Big 12, we're all facing the same challenge, and we're all looking at it from different angles of how we're going to get there. And yet it's a unique time. It is probably the biggest challenge that we've faced. We've gone through a lot. We went through COVID. We went through the 1980s. We were cutting sports because the stock market went down. And I've been around a long time, and we've managed to get through it. We added cost of education. We went to feed them whenever we could, and we always thought, oh, how are we going to afford that? This is a major issue that we're all faced with, and it's not a small issue, but we'll figure it out. We have to figure it out. And if we want to stay competitive, and we still want to win football games and basketball games and baseball games or whatever, we have to make sure we get to that 20 million plus the scholarship increases as well.
Yeah, it's as transformational a moment as it was when Coach Snyder was here trying to turn things around in football.
A lot of similarities in terms of kind of where we were back then.
And there was the mindset and the fear that K-State would be left behind as far as a football power. And here we are, look outside in these stadiums and facilities, and it's all due to you, the fans, and great people of K-State. And I know as we move forward, we're going to talk more about these changes, and we'll all pull together as Wildcat fans, as we always do. Great grit, determination, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and make sure we're still fighting and there among the leaders in the country. But thanks for doing this first one. Very much looking forward to the weeks ahead.
Yeah, and I hope everybody follows it along, because I hope that I can clarify any questions that there may be, any maybe misinformation that's out there. And that's the goal of this, is to really clear up any sort of concerns or questions people may have so they understand it a lot better.
All right, so stay tuned. Next week, we'll be back with another edition of our special Ask the AD series, The Future of K-State Athletics, The Future Part 2. And again, we'll start looking how K-State compares both with their counterparts in the Big 12 and across the region, and then also their impact here locally in Manhattan, Kansas, and across the state. Stay tuned for that. For Director of Athletics Gene Taylor, I'm Brian Smoller. Thank you for watching this special edition of Ask the AD.